I was 11 years old when I moved in with my dad. He lives in Merida. He has this huge house. It's an old house, very, very old house. We don't know like how old, but it's very old. When he first moved to Merida and he was going to get a house, he decided to go for one more ride and he found this huge house. He was with my grandparents and they weren't sure about the size of the house. It's probably gonna be super expensive, but let's ask. They looked for the owner and it was this old lady. She told them she needed to get rid of the house right away. She told them a story like her husband was living in the States. She needed to move. She was going to sell this house for, I think it was 160,000 pesos, which right now it's like $8,000. Super, super cheap. And it's big. It has a huge backyard and it has 5 rooms and two floors, like 300 to 350 square meters. When they first got the house, I was just going on vacation. So the next time that I went there, we went to clean the house. All my memories about that time are fuzzy, blurry, and dark. We cleaned the house, and after a year, when I went back, it was all set up. It was beautiful. The garden was growing. My grandfather had birds. It was great up until I moved in. When I was 11, my dad came and picked me up in my hometown. We drove all the way to Merida. We got there at night. The next day, I was introduced to my new room. It was big and it was beautiful. I had all my boxes there. I was just putting stuff around. Then I saw this huge spider. I was really scared. I screamed like a crazy person. And my father and the guy that helped us in the house were like, what's going on? What's happening? And I was like, there's a huge spider. There's like a tarantula. It ran into my boxes. They looked. They moved the boxes. They opened the boxes. They did everything to find the spider, but it never, ever, ever showed up again. It's a tropical area. Big bugs are normal. We just let it go. I finished setting up my room and I started sleeping there finally. After a couple of weeks, I was cleaning my room. I was making my bed. For some reason, I had 2 beds in my bedroom. I don't know why. There's always 2 beds in every bedroom in that house. I guess that's a very Mexican thing. I was making my bed. The other one was already done. I moved all my stuffed animals and I put them on the other bed. It was chilly that day. So the windows were closed. The fan was off. I was listening to a CD. I finished making my bed. When I looked at my stuffed animals on the other bed, one of them fell down to the floor. I didn't take it seriously, right? It fell under my bed. I bent down, grabbed it, and I put it back on the other bed. Then a second animal fell down. This happened 5 times. They all landed in the same spot, which was weird. But again, I didn't take it seriously. I got fed up. I picked up the last animal and I pushed them all to the center of the bed so that no one would fall off again. I was taking a break. I lay down on my bed. I was on my side, giving my back to the other bed and the animals. The CD stopped. I heard this girl crying behind me, like a tantrum cry. I don't know. It was super weird. It gave me goosebumps. There was no one in my room. My logical mind instantly jumped into explanation. There must be a girl outside and I'm hearing it here because windows, whatever. But I then looked at the windows and they were all closed. It was like, okay, then maybe the CD, but I had listened to that CD like for 1,000 times. I was just like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna leave this room. Goodbye, see you later. I closed the door and I ran downstairs with my dad. He is the biggest skeptic in the world. He was just like, oh, Annie, you and your stories, whatever. He didn't hear me. I got the feeling that that's the parents in every story, right? They are always like brushing off these things. Another night, a week later, I was in my room, ready to go to sleep. Windows were closed, fan was off because it was chilly. The lights were off already and I was laying on my bed. I have very curly, long hair. It was around my face. I closed my eyes, ready to go into the dream world. All of a sudden, I felt a pressure on my hair. I could feel it on my face. Like when somebody hugs you or somebody gets close to you and they press on your hair so you feel the pressure on your face. I felt that and I was like, am I dreaming already? Am I asleep already? No, I'm not. I'm like talking to myself. What the hell is going on? I started feeling weird, like chills and a weird sensation all over my body. Then it started breathing on my ear. I could feel the warm breath. I could hear it. I could feel it and I could hear it. I was like, what is going on in this room? The spider, the girl, the thing breathing in my ear. Goodbye. I grabbed all my things. I went to my father's room. I knew that he wasn't going to believe me. So I was just like, sleepover, woohoo. I just left within that night and I thought it was weird, but he didn't say anything. There were times when I would stay up really late because I was a teenager. I would be in the computer. The computer was downstairs. There are 3 big rooms downstairs in this house. The first big room is right next to the main entrance to the porch. There's a huge window right there that looks out to the street. There's another huge room that would be like the dining room. We never used it like that. Then another big room in the back of the house, which is the kitchen. The computer was in the first room, and there's this archway in the middle room that separates the first one from the second one. This happened many times, many times. I was in the computer just playing on paintbrush or whatever I was doing, and out of the corner of my eye, I could see this white figure peeking out of the archway, as if it was a dog. It was very close to the floor. I would look, and there was nothing there, of course. I would go back to the computer. This would happen, 5, 7, 10 times every time I was in the computer. But I never took it seriously. It was always this shaggy, hairy, white thing that would peek out. I started giving it explanations. I heard that there are sounds that your ears can't really register, but your brain can. So it starts like giving it explanations, making up images for you to understand the sound. I thought it was that. I just let it go. It all changed one day when I was in my grandmother's bedroom. We wouldn't let her sleep alone in that time because my grandfather had just passed away. We were worried about her. We would take turns to sleep in her room, we'll be with her so that she wouldn't spend the night all alone. I was not in my grandmother's bed, but in the other one. So I was sleeping, completely asleep. I started dreaming about this black scenario. It was all black. Kind of like the Stranger Things upside down. There's this middle part in the series where it's all black and the girl connects with the people that are in the upside down, but minus the water, just like this black scenario. And right in the middle of it, there was a table, empty table, wooden empty table, a chair, empty as well, plate, empty, and a spoon on it. For some reason, I knew there was a ghost there, but I couldn't see anything. It was just like that. The spoon moved by itself. It lifted. They started banging the spoon on the plate really loud, faster and faster every time. I started to get really scared. I knew it was a ghost that was doing it. I didn't know if it was going to hurt me or what, but the sound was getting unbearable. I realized that I was dreaming. I started telling myself, like, you have to wake up, we have to get out of here, come on. I finally did it. Just like in the movie, like I sat up in the bed, I was all sweaty and I was panting. Then I felt this chill, but like a scanner. I don't know how to describe it. It's very weird. It started on my toes. It started going up all through my body, all the way up to my head, but just like a scanner, like a line. Whoa, I felt it all the way up to my head. I was like, oh my God, what is this? I was so scared. I'd never felt anything like that in my whole life. I was worried about my grandmother. I don't know, I was just scared. I turned to look at her. She was sleeping in her bed, but this shaggy white figure, hairy, like hairs floating in the air, was sitting right next to her, just like me. We were looking at each other. I couldn't see any faces, I couldn't see any features, I couldn't see anything. Just this white human figure, but the hair was floating. That's what really creeped me out. We was sitting there, and then it lay down on right next to my grandmother. I got up, I went to see, there was nothing there. I was even more scared because I had to spend the night with her. I couldn't just run out of that room and go with my father anymore, right? I was taking care of my grandmother. I couldn't just go and tell him, hey, there's a ghost in my grandmother's room. I can't stay there, because he was gonna tell me that I was a crazy teenager trying to get out of responsibilities. I was so nervous. I was so scared, sweaty, and shaky. Thank God it just passed. I mean, nothing happened again, and I was able to get a few hours of sleep. Around the house, things would get moved around. I don't know, you would leave something here, looked away. When you look back, it wasn't there anymore. But there were so many people in that house at that time, coming and going, that we weren't really worried about that. The doors would close and open, and just like at random times. But again, it's windy. You give it all sorts of explanations. After a few months of living there, I started being friends with the girl next door. We ended up being best friends. She told me that strange things happened in her house. I was like, hey, there things happen in my house too. We started exchanging stories, and some of them sounded familiar, like this white, hairy thing, and also the little girl. I was like, did you hear her? I heard her crying behind me, but I didn't see her. What about you? She was like, no, I've seen her. I've seen her. She's like, I don't know, a 7-year-old. She's carrying a candle and a Bible on the other hand, like she's doing her first communion. She just wanders around my house. We asked the neighbors on the other side of the house. They told us that they saw her too. We didn't give them any information, right? We were just like, oh, yay, does anything happen in your house? They ended up telling us that something was happening in their house. It was just like what was happening to us. It was so weird because these things tend to happen in one place only, but it was happening in 3 different houses. I remember this time we were in the terrace of my house, like the balcony. We were looking down. We saw that the layout of the houses were strange. My friend's house was kind of like inside my garden. If my house was an L, and in the space of the L, it was my friend's house. On the other side, it was like a rectangle, but in the middle of the house next door and mine, there was a little hallway that took you all the way back to another house, like another L, and then the other neighbor's house. We came to the conclusion that back in the day, maybe, I don't know, like 100 years ago, it used to be the same property. For some reason, they divided it and they sold it separately. That was why we thought that the experience was the same in all the houses, right? The neighbors on the other side of the house, they would wake up in the middle of the night. People over there sleep in hammocks, so a lot of people sleep in the same room. They would wake up in the middle of the night, taking turns. It wasn't like everybody at the same time. Whenever somebody would wake up, the girl would be in between the hammocks, just staring at them. They would scream bloody murder, and they were super scared. The girl didn't do anything to them, didn't move stuff or anything, didn't talk to them, didn't make any noises, anything, but they would see her twice a week, 3 times a week. It was a very constant thing for them. My friend on the other side, she would see her wandering around her house, carrying her candle and her Bible. going through doors, through windows, through walls. Like she owned the space. I never ever saw her. Never. I just heard her that one time. I heard like a little girl's voice in the middle of the night, but I was sleeping. So I'm not sure if I was dreaming, if something was going on at the time. Then I started interviewing other people of the family that had stayed in my room before I moved in. Because when my dad went to Merida, all the family from Mexico City started moving to Merida. They all moved there. At some point, they would sleep in my room until they got a house, and then they would move out. There were these cousins that had a really, really little baby, like months old, 4 months old. Whenever they would put the baby to sleep, the baby would be in his crib, and they would leave the room, turn off the lights, close the door, and let's go be adults. After closing the door, the baby would start crying like crazy. Bad crying, screaming, as if somebody was hurting him. They would come into the room and see what was going on. Nothing was there. Baby would go back to sleep again. They would close the door and it would start all over again. This happened every single day. They were tired of that. The baby would cry so loud that the neighbors from the corner of the street, my dad lives in the middle of the street, the people in the corner were wondering if they should call the police because it sounded like people were hitting the baby or doing something to it because it was super, super loud. It lasted for weeks. The father of the baby, my cousin, sometimes in the middle of the night, he would be sleeping on his side. Then he would feel a tiny little finger poking him in the back, calling him out and calling for attention. They did have 2 other children, older children. He would be like, hey, what's going on? What's going on, kids? But nobody was there. This happened many, many times. Somebody touching him in the back, waking him up, and then nobody would be there. My grandmother had this sensitivity. She would see dead people. I never got the chance to ask her if she felt anything or if she knew if anything was going on in the house. But I remember that after one of our dogs died, she told me that she could hear the dog walking around the house. She said, when I'm in my room getting ready to go to sleep, I close the door and I hear the dog walking outside my door. I hear the paws, I hear the claws, I hear the chain around his neck, and I hear him going up the stairs to your father's room. One of the days that I was with her, we were talking before we went to sleep, and she shushed me. So listen, shh, listen. I heard the dog, just like my dog, walking around, sniffing under the door. We heard him go upstairs with the chain and everything. And I was like, oh my God, this is true. I don't know if things that passed away in that house got trapped in there. It was weird. It never really felt like it was just one thing that was there. It always felt like it was something different. The time when I heard, when I felt the breathing on my ear, I felt like it was something bad. It was something that was trying to scare me, to hurt me. It had bad intentions. The white thing with the hairs, it didn't feel evil, but it felt like it was like the owner of the place. I don't know, like this place is mine. And I'm letting you know that I'm here. The little girl, she scared me to death, but she never felt bad or evil or even powerful. After 4 years of living there, I came back to my hometown. My little brother was born over there in Merida. He started growing up. My room became his room. I was a little bit scared for him because I knew things happened in that house and in that room particular, because it was that room. Things happened in my grandmother's room, sometimes in the kitchen, but like the real activity was in my room. My room was surrounded by the balcony. I had windows that looked into the balcony. The glass of the windows was not completely transparent. It had like little shapes in it. Like the blurry kind. There's this very Mexican glass that people like to use to, like, I don't know, for bathroom windows or for that has little flowers almost like engraved in the glass. It has a texture. It was that kind of glass in my bedroom's windows. Every now and then, I would see people walking in the balcony, like around the balcony. They would start on one window, and then if I followed like the direction they went, I would see them in the next window. I always thought like, hey, maybe it's my dad, maybe it's my cousin, maybe it's the guy that helps us. But then after the second window, the balcony ended. There was nowhere for them to go. I never saw them coming back through the window. When I went outside, there was nobody there. One of the things that I saw through the window was this white thing with the hairs, with the floating hairs. When I was there in the bedroom with my best friend, she would see it too, like, hey, there's that thing again. We would follow it. We never had the courage to open the window and see it, scare it, but we would see it constantly, many times a week. Almost every night that we were there in my bedroom. Going back to my brother's time in the bedroom, children are little, sometimes they are allowed to sleep with their parents. He would sleep in my father's room. Since he was little, we thought that was normal, but then he started growing up and he wouldn't get out of that room. He wouldn't sleep in his room, not for a full night, not ever. We would always ask him like, hey, why don't you go to your own bedroom? He was always like, yeah, I don't like it. I like my parents' bedroom. I like sleeping there. He would always explain it like this. But then years and years passed and he was doing the same thing. And you know how families are. And we were like, hey, you should take him to therapy. This is not normal. You are not working on boundaries. When my brother got older, like 14 or 15 years old, he came to visit me. We were driving to a little town. I saw a person on a bicycle right in front of me. They were going the same direction that I was going to. All of a sudden, I stopped seeing them. And I told my brother, like, hey, where's the guy on the bicycle? He was like, what guy? I saw a guy on a bicycle. He was just in front of us. We looked around. There was nobody there. I was like, oh, I'm seeing things again. He looked at me and he was like, hey, so you can also see and feel things? I felt like a whole topic coming on. I was like, yeah, I can feel things. I've seen things. Why? Do you have that sensitivity too? He was like, well, I don't know if I have some kind of sensitivity, but I've seen things. You know how I always sleep in my dad's bedroom? That's because every time I go to sleep in my bedroom, I wake up in the middle of the night and there are people standing around my bed. Black figures, 7, 8, 10 figures, staring at me around my bed. And this happens every time. Every night that I sleep in my room, there are people around me. I tried telling my dad when I was little, but he never believed me. So I decided to not tell anyone and just sleep in my parents' bedroom forever. Whenever he's there doing homework or whatever, he feels people behind him. He has glimpses or hands or some kind of gown or clothes of the person that is standing right behind him, but when he turns, there's no one there. There's something going on in that room. I've always dreaded that room. When I go visit and I'm offered to stay in that room, I do avoid it as well, just like my brother. I don't like going in there. It's dark, although it has 3 windows on each wall. They're always open, but it's dark. And the air feels stuffy, even when you have the fan on. I feel a kind of pressure on my chest whenever I'm in that room. The last time that I visited them, I went into the room and I was like, I'm an adult. I'm not scared of anything. I'm just going to check where this thing is coming from. Maybe there's something in the room. I checked the closets, under the beds. If I could have checked under the tiles, I would have done it. But there was nothing. I thought maybe something was going on, and at the top of the closet, there's this, I don't know, like an extra compartment where you can stuff things from winter or whatever. I got on a chair, looked in there. I was hoping to find some kind of witchcraft thing, a hex bag or something, but there was nothing there. The room was completely free of stuff, but the energy is bad in there. It stopped a couple of years ago when they built a new bathroom in the downstairs bedroom where my grandmother used to sleep. I've heard that sometimes this kind of activity, it stops after people make modifications in the house. My brother has been telling me that nothing is going on now. Last year I visited them. The only thing that happened was that we were outside on the porch with my ex-boyfriend and my dad were sitting there in the porch. We were smoking a cigarette. My dad's back was to the main door and we were facing it. We were talking and my ex-boyfriend and I saw the door open very slowly. It wasn't a wind thing. There was no wind whatsoever during that night. The door moved as if somebody was controlling it. It would open a little bit, very slowly. Then it stopped. Then it opened a little bit more, closed again. This happened 3 times. I just looked at my ex-boyfriend. He saw me and we were exchanging looks, but we didn't want to say anything to my dad because he was going to brush it off again. But I was like, hey, you see how things happen in this house? And he was like, yeah, this is weird. Something strange happened after I moved back to my hometown. My mother's house, it feels very safe. It has a really nice energy. I live here right now. My mom is not living here anymore. We moved into the house. It's always been super calm, but I've had these sleep paralysis, which I don't feel like paralysis because I can't move. I can move my fingers, my legs, I can move. But I feel super heavy, like I'm super sleepy. Like when you are really sleepy, your eyes are closing and you can't control them. That's how I feel every time this happens. Every time I get this kind of sleep paralysis. This happens when I am sleeping on my belly, not on my back or on the side. It's always when I'm in that position. I feel there's someone behind me. I know there's someone there. I don't know, for some reason I know. I decide not to move. I don't want them to know that I'm awake. I think it was twice. I picked back, maybe to catch a look at this person or whatever was there harassing me. It was the same white, hairy thing from my dad's house. I don't know if it followed me, if it attached to me, if it's a thing that travels. I don't know. It looks like a person. It looks human. An average height person. I wouldn't say that it's super tall or super small. It has like a normal body. Very thin. It's very, very thin. And it's just like a shape. It doesn't have any features. I've never seen any details, eyes or clothes or hands or even fingers. It's just this white figure. It doesn't glow. It even looks dirty. Like when your white clothes are old and they are yellowish, it looks like that. The face is long, very pointy. That's all the details that I get when I see it. The hair, I would say that it's shoulder long, but it's always floating around its head, like if it was underwater. It's always floating, always. Every time I've seen it, it's always moving, floating. I hope this never happens again. I haven't had that experience for a year, but I don't know, it sometimes come back. I've been living in this house for 3 years now. It has happened 5 or 7 times ever since we moved in. I'm sure that it's the same thing from my father's house. I don't know what it is. If it's a spirit or I don't want to say demon, right? Because nothing else has happened, but I do know that there are these beings that the Mayans used to plant in their sacred places or like the places that they wanted to protect, and they asked them to protect them. They are called aluches. I know that there are things that people used to protect their houses many years ago. I don't know if it's something like that. The neighbors around my dad's house, they say that That house used to be the main building of a big plantation that used to be there. Usually these buildings, they are preserved and they become tourist places for visiting, eating and stuff. There is no certainty that it was actually a plantation, but if you look on a map, see it from the air, it does look like it was a main house, and around there are just little houses. The way it is laid out, it is pretty obvious that it was like that many years ago. Recently, well, this was a local legend that there was a cenote under the house, under my father's house. People talk about it, right? Like all excited. Oh yeah, they say there's a cenote under their house. Oh yeah, that would be amazing. It wasn't proved until somebody found an entrance in the house that is not next door, but the following. You go into the patio, and right there in the middle of the patio, there's a hole in the ground. If you go in there, walk a few steps, you get into the cenote that is right under my dad's house. So the legend was actually true. It all makes sense when you put it together. The construction of my father's house that is now divided into 4 different houses, events happening in all 4 houses, the main building in the center of something around it like a plantation. They would build these places near cenotes because they needed the water. Maybe someday I will look into the history of that place, and then I will find some interesting answers. Another local legend around my father's house, the neighborhood legend, is that the lady that used to live in that house, she practiced witchcraft. My best friend's brothers, they were little at the time when the lady was living there. She would call them to pick stuff from her house or help her around. They say that they saw strange things, jars of weird stuff around the kitchen. The house was always stuffy and dark, that she would be mean. She had this evil look in her eyes. Of course, we don't know this because we never met the lady, but the other ladies around there are super religious. They say that she used to practice witchcraft. And the reason why she wanted to get rid of the house was because it was completely haunted after years of witchcraft, right? So she wanted to move out of the house. Many people saw it. Other cousins saw it, felt it, heard it. They said that the cenotes were the entrance to the underworld, and they would perform sacrifices there. There are tons of cenotes over there. Maybe this was done there too, and it stayed there.